cover the open carry they talked about. I'm going to cover it when I talk about Second Amendment. That stacks Second Amendment stuff right there.
Yeah, that was really good.
But
you know what? I caught them. They said it was okay to take the gun in the church. And you heard me go,
Well, it is with permission, he said. He told
Well,
me.
no, he wasn't going to say that.
I didn't know they had to have a special training thing to do it.
Yep, 8 hours.
4, 3, 2.
We're back, folks. Freedom Forum on this, the 10th day of the 9th month, year of our Lord Jesus the Christ, 2014. Heavenly Father, give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to do your will in all things. And give us the same so that we may go out and reach other people and teach them what's really going on in the world. And help our country in this time of need. We have things that can only be handled with your help. In Jesus the Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And of course, folks, he tells us in the Holy Bible that he will not give us any problem that we cannot solve with his help. So don't try and go it alone. When the day seems the darkest, when it doesn't seem like there's going to be a dawn, pray. Turn it over to Jehovah.
Amen.
And I'm going to cover the first part of the show tonight. We're going to talk about matters of Christianity after we talk about the meeting last night.
Oh, yeah. We can't.
But first, we got our meetings coming up. We'll let Jim talk about tomorrow night's meeting with Katie and the Patriots.
Now?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Good. And that's your cue.
Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
I didn't get it. A little slow. I had to make a quick trip. September 11th has become a big day in the history of this country for many reasons. Our meeting is at the Robichaux Recreation Center tomorrow from 6 to 8:30. And I put the agenda together, some highlights. I have a good video on the Star Spangled Banner. There's a video, I'm going down the agenda, 9/11 video and a little bit of a speech. And then we have Hartwell giving his speech. I have it down, Hartwell, 20 minutes. He told me I couldn't give him one less minute. And then the next thing we'll discuss is we have a Benghazi video and the speech to honor all these people. Then after we get through that, we're going to have Elbert Gilroy, State Senator Elbert Gilroy gives a speech. We have a young man who's on our executive committee that's at UL, Graham Badusi. He's going to talk on ULL conservatives. We're going to do a candlelight vigil, but we aren't going to, everybody's not going to have a candle. We're just going to have 1 or 2 candles in honor of all those who lost and their families. And the last half hour will be like an open discussion, but from what I see of this, probably won't be a half hour. But you don't want to miss this. The videos are good. We're going to have, with every, and I'm going to speak about this a little bit tomorrow, with every crisis that happens in this country, World War II, Pearl Harbor, Iraq, and WMDs, there's always those conspiracy theories. And how do we know that a lot of that stuff isn't true? And so we're going to be a little bit open tomorrow night and get both sides of what people believe. That's part of it. The Benghazi thing, it's like I planned to do that, and more stuff came my way, and there's a book that's been written that's very, very, very revealing.
Yeah, I heard about that. Plus the guys that were on
yeah.
Fox last week.
I tried to get that on my computer, but for some reason I just couldn't load it up to show it. But all that'll be brought to the forefront tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. Bring a friend. The Star Spangled Banner video will actually be an educational thing for kids and stuff, older kids, let's say 12 years and older, that you bring to the meeting. So that's pretty much what's going on there.
The Robichaux Center on Egress Landry across from
From-
Cox Building. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m.
And look for a big sign like this, be out front.
All right. Then next week, let's see, there's not anything, there's no special meetings and all like we had with the BOP. That's something else we got to talk about a little bit too, is the BOP meeting. We'll get to that in a minute after we discuss last night's meeting. Next week is going to be a big week for us. We're going to have a special guest here on the show. And again, let me know if you want to come. I've already had some people tell me they're going to be here to be our peanut gallery. We're going to have Renee Powers from California, who is a radio host. She has her own radio show. If you're on the email list, you got the information on that. And she's also just been picked up after we started talking to her about coming here. She got picked up by one of the local radio stations also. She was on the internet, now she's gone, I guess they call that legit, sort of. But she was down on the border recently, had some interesting adventures, and there's been a lot going on since then that she's going to be talking about, both on the show next Wednesday and at our regular Freedom Forum public meeting the following night at Elise's at 6:30. Come early, we'll get there early, and you can chat with her if you want before the meeting. And of course the show will run the full 8 to 10 o'clock hours next Wednesday. And if you, again, try and let me know if you want to come so that we can make sure we have enough room, because we're going to be, can you? Yeah, you can come, you can be there too. We might even, nah, maybe not. But let me know so we can get it set up. We're going to have a time constraint there between shows. We're going to use the big studio, as it were. And hopefully we'll have Ustream for next week in that studio. We have it for tonight.
We have it for
allegedly. So if you can't get it,
like
call
last
in.
week?
If you can't see us, if you can't hear me, call in and let me know, would you? That's like I have to ask at every meeting if somebody's not there yet, and we get people that raise their hands. So anyway, okay. Let's see what else. I think that's it for meeting information for now. Now let's go into the meetings that we've just been to.
Oh,
we want to
wow.
do Ray's meeting first.
We definitely, way to go, Ray.
Ray is probably watching tonight, and if he wants to call in and with his comments about the meeting last night, we definitely appreciated what he did. He did a bang-up job
Wow.
in starting to present the Citizens Rule Book and the Constitution therein, and other little tidbits out of it. But it's basically the Constitution is what Ray is going to start discussing regularly. And this is in keeping with his attempt to get the local government and the state government to at least put forth some kind of declaration that people that want to run for public office have to take a test on the Constitution. And I like the way, what?
It's going to be at the council meeting next
Yeah, he'll be at
Tuesday.
the council meeting next Tuesday night. So go over there and support him if you get the chance. One of the councilmen was there last night.
Yeah,
That was,
Andy Knockham.
Andy Knockham was there. And
Yeah.
if he's watching tonight, which he might be, thanks for coming, Andy. It was good to see you. And
Yeah.
your input was valuable.
He told me I might not, should go to the council meeting next
He
Tuesday.
told you shouldn't go?
Possibly.
Oh, okay, he's gonna, what, are they gonna have handcuffs and a mute for you? Put a gag on you and
Oh, just
chain you up?
grip the thing again.
Okay, anyway, it's gonna be interesting. But Ray covered, in general terms, the Constitution and what its reason for being is. And before he started, though, there were 3 police officers with Lafayette City Police were there talking about the open carry of firearms in public, and I'm going to come back to that. We've talked about it on the show before, but it's important enough to come back to, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to have a little bit more on Article 2 of the Bill of Rights shortly. We'll come back to what those officers were discussing, and I'll elaborate on some of that for you tonight when we get to it.
I mean, what Ray did last night was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
Yep, speak up. They're having trouble
He,
hearing us.
I mean, we had a full house. That
Yeah, it
room
was-
that room was filled up. I don't know how many people were there actually, but I know we had a full house. We had it, and we did have a mixture of young and older.
Yeah, it was.
I won't say old.
Speak for yourself. But yeah, it was a real good response. I was glad to see that, and he's going to have that meeting at Thomas Park every second Tuesday. Every second Tuesday at 6 p.m. And I would encourage you folks to turn out, learn something. It's not something we haven't covered on this show over the last 20 years multiple times, but he's getting it condensed down to, a couple of hours, and you don't have to sit through my talking for several weeks on end before you get all the information. So it's going to be very worthwhile to attend. And he's got some support. Obviously, police department is supporting him. The chief of police would like to see a formal class set up, which this will become that eventually, if it's not already. I don't know what their arrangements have been. But the chief was wanting to have his officers attend the class also. And as long as there were, he made a stipulation. He wanted members of the public to be there. And I think that's a good idea, where the police and the public can interact in that kind of setting would be primo. So,
I think the councilmen should all be there also,
well, it would be nice, but there again.
and maybe some school board members.
Yeah, school children. Ray's trying to get some classes going for children in the did we lose our, oh geez. Jacob! Guess what? Nope, it's back. It's the camera. The screen on the camera went off too. This is AOC. If we don't have something like that, we don't know we're on
Something go wrong.
AOC.
It'd be a bad night.
Yeah,
It'd be a really bad night if something didn't go wrong here.
yeah, we think that, well, wait a minute, what's happened?
Now we
There's
have to
something-
look at that camera,
Well, let's see, it's back up, so,
not that camera.
but that one is the one that's on us right now. Okay, nope, that one's gone. Or is it? Okay. The main text of Ray's classes is going to be the Citizens Rule Book, which
And everyone.
donations appreciated and donations allowed. He'll be able to hand these out at the meeting at every one of the classes for folks that are new. So this is a superb. In fact, I'm going to have to. What? Yeah, I'm going to have to tape mine up. This is my my work copy for the show, and it's already lost part of the cover, which has got good stuff on the back cover.
You need
So
to get a new one.
I got a new one in there somewhere. Anyway, we got plenty of them. But again, congratulations to Ray. It was a job
It was
well
an
done.
awesome job, I mean.
And we'll
Nobody left early.
No, no. Everybody will appreciate what he's doing. You'll get a lot out of it. And I'm gonna
And
talk.
by the
some-
way, he's only 81 years old. so
Right. Right.
Amazing.
Okay. Now I want to get into some things pertaining to our faith.
I've been churched out today. 5 o'clock this morning.
Well, you can get some more.
And I just left.
A high school student in Harahan wrote this letter to the editor recently. In the New Orleans Advocate of July 16th, there was an ad placed by the Wildlife Conservation Society. The ad stated that 96 elephants are killed in Africa every day. In addition, two of the conservationists, Samantha Strindberg and Fiona Meisel, are quoted as saying, quote, "If we do not act, we will have to shamefully admit to our children that we stood by as elephants were driven out of extinction," unquote. Let's put these 96 elephants into perspective. In the U.S. alone, 3,000 unborn children are murdered every day. While we rush to save the elephants and hurry to rescue the blue whales, we're forgetting that our future is slowly disappearing, one abortion at a time. If we do not put an end to abortion, we may be left confessing to the elephants that we did nothing as our children were murdered. It irks me that in today's society, animals are worth saving, but unborn children are not.
Wow.
Let's see, am I? Yeah, we're still on that
Yeah,
camera.
on
Okay.
that camera.
I do want to make it clear that I do not think we should stand by and watch as elephants are hunted to extinction. I simply believe we ought to do something about the murdering of the next generation before we worry about the elephants.
That's
And that's a high school student.
high school senior.
From Greg Mistrick, Senior Technical Engineer, Baton Rouge. Abortion issue centers on the ending of human life. Susan Estrich's commentary in a recent Advocate contains many phrases or terms that are worth debating, including the termination of a life as a, quote, medical procedure, unquote. I'll focus only on the last word in the article, in which she laments how cruel it is for any restrictions at all to stand in the way of any abortion, any time, any place. Would she use the same words to describe methods of abortion, such as partial birth, puncture an infant's skull and vacuum its brains out, salt poisoning, baby ingests deadly saline solution, or dilation and cutterage, infant chopped to pieces by a small hooked knife? I suppose she would not, as it's far easier to dehumanize a fetus and just call it a choice. Death row prisoners do not face such treatments, which would surely be labeled and banned as cruel and unusual punishment. Animals receive more protection than the unborn in this nation. The Roe v. Wade decision was the beginning of a cheapening of life in this country that's only gathered momentum in the last 40 years, as witnessed by euthanasia, assisted suicide, arguments ending in deadly shootings amongst teens, gang violence, you name it. Perhaps what it all comes down to is whether what's being debated is indeed a medical procedure decision or a human life. To me, it's clearly the latter, and since an innocent unborn child is completely helpless and unable to fight for its own life, it's up to us who consider abortion to be a deadly stain on our nation's moral character to fight for them ourselves. Tired of fighting for a legal decision made over 40 years ago? Join the club. The Second Amendment has been part of the Constitution and Bill of Rights for well over 200 years, and court battles over this right are fought every year. Some things, especially the precious life of a child, are well worth fighting for. And you're going to hear this again. I've read these already before. I'm going to read them again. These are so well done. You know, Ray brought this out last night about from whence the Constitution issued. Okay? And he stressed that while it did originate with the early English documents, starting with the Magna Carta in the 13th century, there were several more after that, which I want to go into some detail on that later. I'm going to use as a reference that lady, what's her name, that had her book here. I can't think of her name now.
Chris Ann.
Chris Ann Hall. She detailed each of the previous documents in English history that led up to our Constitution. Did you know that the English actually had a Bill of Rights? But it was all based on their Christian heritage. Okay? Our founding fathers have been called various things, usually deists, but that's incorrect as far as particularly Thomas Jefferson goes. As I've read to you on the show before, Thomas Jefferson was a devout Christian, and this was obvious in his writings, but certain groups of people have deemed it appropriate to belittle his Christianity because they like to think of him as the founder of their organizations or some basis for their organizations. So, and since they're not Christian, they don't want to paint him with the Christian brush, if you will. But let's hear what some of them had to say. George Washington, some of the founding fathers, that is. I now make it my earnest prayer that God have you and the state over which you preside in his holy protection, that he would incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another. Let me stop here. Go ahead.
Go ahead, caller. Oh,
You hang them up?
I hung him up.
Call back.
Call back. Wrong button.
Let me do something here. So it's not quite so loud. Now we're here just a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, caller.
Are you the next available representative, I guess?
Say again?
I said, are you the next available representative?
Yeah, only as long as you're not selling insurance.
Hey, just watching the news crawl on Fox, they just put across there, you see it one time and it disappears, that they have the biggest solar flare coming towards the Earth, and it could possibly hit tomorrow morning, disrupting all the power grids.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah,
Get you-
okay, it's kind of a coincidence the same day it happens, but yeah, it just went across the crawl on Fox.
Oh, we're going to have to...
I
There's...
want to check that out, and they said, I don't know what
Okay.
part of the world it's going to hit, what time, but it could possibly hit tomorrow morning.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to check that. If you're online, if you can go online and let us know something tonight, there's a website that has all that information on it, and you can go on it and it'll actually show you the stuff as it happens. And there's a delay. That's how they know the stuff's coming, is they're watching for these things, and there's a delay of a couple of days, I think, before it actually reaches the Earth from the time it erupts, and they can calculate what part of the Earth will be hit, if it'll be hit at all. And there's some pretty bad ones in recent history. Like in the last 2 months, there's some pretty bad ones. That if we had been a few days later in our orbit or earlier in our orbit, we'd have been whacked good. So this is something that we've been trying to prepare you folks for. And if indeed this looks like a problem, then you need to get your electronics, your small electronic devices that you'll need for an emergency, like radios. Get them in a Faraday cage, which basically just get a cardboard box, put them in a cardboard box and wrap it with aluminum foil. And that should handle it unless it's a massive flare.
Not necessarily for a solar flare. Nuclear detonation it is.
Yeah.
Not solar.
Solar flares won't affect electronics. They affect running water.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'd wrap your stuff up. Okay, I'm gonna check that tonight when I get back.
Better not screw up my meeting tomorrow night.
Well, hey, it is September 11th after all. If anything could happen.
Yeah, and that could have been
From
a
midnight
hoax.
on.
Another one of them hoax.
Well, Fox is usually pretty good about putting stuff out, but then they won't put it out again. Like he said, you might just see it
Went
once.
across there once.
Well, say a prayer tonight. Okay, back to George Washington. Hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another, for their fellow citizens of the United States at large, and particularly for their brethren who have served in the field. And finally, that he would be most graciously pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, and without a humble imitation of whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. Let me borrow that a minute, because mine is missing. Remember 2 Corinthians 7:14. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. See, mine's missing it. Thomas Jefferson. Now think about this. Was this man a deist? God who gave us life gave us liberty. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are of the gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with his wrath? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. This is not a deist speaking, folks. A deist would not have this attitude. A deist would have the attitude, oh well, things are going to happen, stuff happens, God has nothing to do with it. No, Thomas Jefferson was not a deist. Benjamin Franklin, who, he's got a bad rap. But Ben was the guy that when the Declaration of Independence was being sandbagged by certain members of the delegation and they couldn't agree on anything, he said, whoa. He stopped all the proceedings and said, we need to say a prayer right now, and from now on, before we open every session, we need to say a prayer to our Heavenly Father to guide us. In other words, give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to do what we need to do. That was Ben Franklin. Also has gotten a bad rap. Again, they've got to make these guys look bad so that, A, we don't revere them. We don't look up to them. And B, we forget our history. Because he who does not remember his history is doomed. God governs in the affairs of man, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this. I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. Okay? Strong words, folks.
Absolutely.
Now, this is ongoing. This is ongoing. But before we get into what's ongoing, let me read something from Ezekiel. And it will kind of put our position into focus for some of you that have not heard this before. Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man from among them, and make him their watchman, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet, and warn the people, then he that heareth the sound of the trumpet, and will not be warned, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. For he heard the sound of the trumpet and would not be admonished. Therefore his blood shall be upon him. But he that receiveth warning shall save his life. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away for his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So thou, O son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth and admonish them from me. Okay. Watchman. Now let's morph into what us watchmen have been good at telling you about. Why you need to be armed. First, let's go back before the Christian era. An ancient Chinese writing that was unearthed in an archaeological dig, it said this: your subject has heard that when the ancients made the 5 kinds of weapons, it was not the purpose of killing each other, but to prevent tyranny and to punish evil. When people lived in peace, these weapons were to be prepared against emergencies and to kill the fierce animals. If there were military affairs, then the weapons were used to set up defenses and form battle arrays. Moving on to ancient Greece, first in the words of the philosopher Aristotle, this analysis of an authoritarian form of government that had been advocated by Plato. The whole constitutional setup is intended to be neither democracy nor oligarchy, but midway between the two, what is sometimes called polity, the members of which are those who bear arms. And in criticizing the monopolization of arms bearing in the hands of one class that was being advocated by his colleague Hippodamus, Aristotle commented, Hippodamus planned a city with a population of 10,000, divided into three parts, one of skilled workers, one of agriculturalists, and a third to bear arms and secure defense. But the legal restriction of arms bearing to a given class would mean that the farmers have no arms, the workers have neither land nor arms. This makes them virtually the servants of those who do possess arms. In these circumstances, the equal sharing of offices and honors becomes an impossibility. In other words, there is no equality in a society such as this. And since those who possess arms must be superior in power to both the other sections, the constitution proposed by Hippodamus would breed inequality and discontent. So, we've told you about the Mexican militias that formed in the northwestern parts of Mexico a while back to battle the drug cartels that were running roughshod over their villages. Well, the same thing has occurred in the Middle East and is ongoing as we speak, and I think everyone out there knows why this is happening. And last Sunday in the Advocate they had an article about this entitled "Some Christians Armed as Mideast Perils Mount." And I'll give you the gist of this. As more and more of these Christian villages and Christian enclaves within the cities that were seized by these Muslim terrorists, as more and more of the Christians fled, it dawned on the ones remaining and the ones that fled that they needed to be armed. And for the first time since the Lebanese Civil War ended in 1990, Lebanese Christians are rearming and setting up self-defense units to protect themselves. Across the Middle East, Christian communities as old as the religion itself feel their very survival is now at stake, threatened by militants of the Islamic State group rampaging across Iraq and Syria. These people are taking this seriously. They're buying their weapons on the black market, which means that the governments aren't helping them, except there are a few cases where, let's see, where was it? Some of the Muslim groups, especially in Lebanon, that were being preyed upon by the Islamic State, assisted these Christians in acquiring arms because the Christian villages were between them and ISIS. So they figured, well, these are going to be a buffer zone. Plus, a lot of the Christians have joined with the Kurdish tribesmen in northern Iraq and Syria to repel ISIS. Some people. So, again, why do we have arms, folks? First and foremost, and in everyday life, to protect ourselves from our own local people who might prey upon us, criminal types, criminal elements, but then, and more importantly, from the overall scheme of things, to protect our rights as a people, as a country. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution are written on hemp paper. They won't stop a bullet. The Bill of Rights does not protect our rights. Okay? You protect your rights. You protect it firstly by the lawful process, the peaceful process through the rules set down by the government, supposedly on the basis of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, supposedly. Where that fails, as a last resort, when you can no longer rely on the rule of law in this country, we have our firearms. we are fortunate in that regard, where now, in the last couple of years, it's estimated that the numbers of people that own firearms now has doubled within the last couple of years. So there's twice as many people now owning guns, even though A, they may not know how to use it, and B, they may not be the best firearms for repelling invaders or tyrants. However, they still have them. So we have more people, numbers-wise, and probably percentage-wise, own firearms in this country now than ever before. As far as the numbers of firearms go, of course, that goes without saying. There's now more firearms in this country than there's ever been before, because we've got all the old stuff, much of which is not figured into the figures that you see the government putting out as far as the numbers of firearms out there, because they have no idea how many of the old usable firearms are still around, because there was no record of them before, and there's no record of them now. So when you see those numbers, figure that there's probably a factor, again, more guns in the country. Not necessarily as effective, but they're still firearms. What I mean by that is at least twice as many firearms in the country as the government tells you there are. All right. In this vein, Romans 13 comes to mind. The problem: many Christian pastors and leaders today are erroneously reviving the divine right of kings argument used in the Dark Ages, which created some of the most horrific human affairs in history. They, like the grandfather of communism, George Hegel, argue that government is divinely sanctioned to do anything it pleases, and that God requires people to submit regardless of natural standards of justice. This argument has been used by virtually every tyrant since Jesus' life, including Adolf Hitler, and it's fallaciously being used by many pseudo-Christians. This false premise is doing more to bring America and the rest of the world into oppression and slavery than perhaps any other doctrine. Holders of this doctrine are creating self-fulfilling prophecies of America's ruin, all in the name of a shallow reading and misconstruction of Romans chapter 13. And we've had this thrown back in our faces constantly. Oh, but in Romans 13 it says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, so we have to do what the government says. Wait. This has not gone unchallenged. The response, the true meaning of submission, shows from Romans 13 with overwhelming support that submission to government is limited, and they obey government no matter what argument is false. Romans 13 discusses and shows sound rules of biblical interpretation and construction, logical and literal reasoning, and there's plenty of other proof of these conclusions. What this means in Romans 13 is the government has to be godly. Their decisions have to be godly. The leaders have to be godly for us to obey, number one. Number two, when it says render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, it's very simple. We're Caesar in this country. Read your Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. It'll explain it to you. We are Caesar in this country. So the government is our servants. We are not their servants. Why is it that the servant should be better armed than the master? Think about it. Okay. Now let's go into what was discussed at the meeting last night by the police officers. The open carry of firearms in the city specifically, but the state of Louisiana in general. Understand that the open carry of firearms is allowed under state law. But also understand this very simple point that officers stressed and made sure everybody understood this, that if a private owner or the management of a government building. Now, government building is a little tricky there because it's supposedly owned by us, but we'll have to be submissive in that case. If the management of a building or a property, let's say the mall and its environs, its parking lot, if they do not want you carrying openly then you do not carry openly. You put your firearm away or you leave. You have the right to not spend your money at an establishment where you're not allowed to carry, one way or the other, either openly or concealed. Now, if you have a concealed carry permit and choose to carry on the premises, they're not going to know, generally, if you're doing it right. They won't know that you're carrying. But if there's a sign on the door, and I've seen these in places where if a private organization, do it? If they don't want you carrying a firearm in the place, then you could be asked to leave if they spot that you're carrying that you're carrying a concealed firearm. If you're carrying openly, on the other hand, if you see that sign on the door, you should just walk back to your car and either leave or put the firearm in the car and then go inside if you're so inclined. Okay? This is critical, folks. This is critical. Because people have gotten themselves in trouble here in Lafayette when they squawk and they start whining that they have the right to carry anywhere they want to. No, you don't. Not if the owner, they have property rights. Understand this. Their property is their control, under their control. They have the right to deny you the right to carry. The government does not have that right. The police officers were very clear about that. They do not have the right to tell you that you got to put your gun away unless they're acting on the orders or the instructions of somebody whose private property you are on and you refuse to follow the instructions of the property owner. Okay, you're guilty of trespass at that point if you don't leave or put your firearm away. So there are ramifications. Now, something that they mentioned that I want to elaborate on a little bit more is about your responsibility if you're going to insist on open carry. And I'll get into our recommendation on that in a second. But if you're going to insist on open carry, you have a responsibility, both criminally and civilly, to ensure that that firearm stays under your control no matter what. Okay? You are civilly and criminally liable if somebody gets a hold of that firearm and uses it against somebody else. So you've got to make sure you know how to keep it under control. And I've done that to people who were openly carrying. I've taken their guns away from them after telling them that. They had no concept of what it meant to retain that weapon. Oh no, that's the first thing you need to be sure of, that you can retain that firearm. And even to the point of them throwing you around the room if you're small stature. Therefore, we don't recommend open carry. Or I don't. Okay, speaking for me personally, no. But also some professionals I know who are all in favor of Article 2 of the Bill of Rights, 120%. Well, you can't be. Okay. 100% in favor of Article 2 of the Bill of Rights. They're quite vocal proponents of that. But there's some very practical, tactical reasons why you don't want to open carry. Number one, you're giving yourself away as carrying a firearm. Therefore, if somebody wants to cause trouble and they want to show you how big they are, they'll ambush you. In the store, in the parking lot, whatever. They're planning to cause trouble, but they know who's got a gun. You. So they take you out. Or you're of small stature and he or they are bigger than you are, and they decide, I'm going to take your gun away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it because physically they jump you, they surprise you. So there again, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. You've got to be constantly watching for enemy fighters. You've got to be as if you were a Battle of Britain Spitfire pilot watching for Messerschmitts. You've got to be constantly watching for threats. So most people are not going to do that. Very few people are going to be in the situation where they can protect their firearm and they can keep their level. I mean, you're shopping in a mall, for crying out loud. Can you keep your level of attention at such a state where nobody can approach you without you knowing it? In a crowd in a mall? Come on. Let's be reasonable here. So, if you insist on carrying, then if you want to do it legally, you get a permit from the state and you legally carry, but it's hidden away. It's easier to retain a firearm that's hidden also, because it's got something covering it. It's much easier, first of all, to hide it where bad guys won't see it. And again, you don't cause any uproar over it, which they mentioned one, that this is they're constantly getting calls now where they never used to about people carrying guns in public, and they'll check on you. They might watch you for a while. If you're acting in the least bit suspicious, they might stop you and ask you your name, etc. But cooperate with the police in this case. They had one recently. It was downtown on Jefferson Street. The individual was carrying a rifle. He was carrying it in the front position, down the ready down position. Wasn't threatening anybody, but
Totally legal.
people got antsy about it. Okay. We have rules about it within our organization, Louisiana Unorganized Militia, about doing that. We don't ban people from carrying handguns openly, but long guns, you're just asking for trouble, folks. Even though it's legal, that doesn't matter. Lawful, it is lawful. It's lawful also. Okay, it falls under the rules of both the Constitution, because what's the Bill of Rights say? Keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, but it's not a good idea in this day and age. Now, if there's an emergency situation, things change. Okay, we're not talking about it. We're talking about, why was somebody carrying a rifle down Jefferson Street in the middle of the crowd?
Of all places.
Of all places, okay? It was running the risk, first of all, of getting jumped.
Exactly.
By some hoodlums who decide, hey, I like your rifle, I'm going to take it away from you. And if he had it slung like the officers were saying, then I can grab that rifle and I own you if I can grab your rifle. Okay? You're going to get hurt. So don't do it, folks. Don't do it. And there's been people, I've talked about them before, they've shown up on Facebook toting their rifles in public, and it's just bad. It's bad PR, folks, for one thing. For the folks that believe in Article 2 and arming themselves, that is bad. Now, for those folks that are not Christians, it's bad karma. Okay? So, don't do it. All right, if you got any questions about that, ask us at the meeting next week or call in. But that's the bottom line here. Let's think. Let's think.
I mean, I had an incident when I was up in actually Winnsboro, where I went out, was doing a job up there at a medical clinic. I went outside, and there was some really bad stuff, domestic stuff going on. And I called 911, and all of a sudden the guy pulled out a weapon, and I had my weapon at hand's reach. But the rules that I know is I was not threatened. He didn't point his weapon, and then I just yelled at him and said, "Why don't you back down?" And he pointed his weapon at me. And I ducked. And about that time, the police came in the parking lot. And the police officer came over to me and said, "Do you have a weapon?" And I said, "Yes." Uh-oh.
Hold that
Go
thought.
ahead, caller.
Yeah, forgive my ignorance, but on the flag, what does the 1-1 stand for? I know the 13 stars are for 13 colonies, and the stripes are for the 13 colonies.
That's
what is the 1-1 for?
That's the Roman numeral 2 for the Second Revolution.
Oh, that's what it stands
Which,
for.
see, actually, the Second Revolution is now, in their terms. This is something that some Tea Party folks did right at the beginning of the Tea Party movement. And I like it, but actually the second revolution was the 1861-65 war and the Reconstruction aftermath. That was the second revolution. So they're, again, they don't understand their history well enough. But
Well, it's like I said, forgive my ignorance. I just said when I'm watching something, I
yeah,
appreciate you explaining it to me, and thank you very kindly.
sure thing.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, if he's not going to be the only one to have a question, but that's
No.
okay.
Anyways, the police officer came over and asked me if I had a weapon, and I showed him the weapon. And he said, "Did you ever point a weapon at the individual?" And I said, "No." He said, "Did the individual ever point the weapon at you?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "That is my question." And that's when I asked him, you know, had he gone to shoot her, would have I had the right to shoot him? And he said yes.
Yeah.
He
You
said
have
the only way that carried is that he did point the weapon at me. Believe me, I was scared. But the whole thing is, not the first time I had a weapon pointed at me, but the whole thing is that I learned from that situation. Had I brought my weapon out beforehand, I could have got arrested. Basically.
there again, it depends on what he was doing.
Yeah.
Okay, if you saw a situation where it looked like he was going to get really serious and threaten somebody or you,
Or he's threatening his
so
ex-wife.
again, it's a judgment call at that point. However, one thing that you should have done is gone to cover.
I wasn't covered.
Okay, you were undercover. All right.
Yeah.
Cover is something that will stop bullets. Even if there's nothing around there, get on the ground, make as small a target as you can towards the bad guy. And again, it's a judgment call. A lot of people
When
would
he
have.
had the weapon out, I went
Yeah.
behind my car.
Okay,
But I had my weapon. But he couldn't see it.
yeah. Okay,
But you have to be smart
Yeah.
in situations because you can get yourself in trouble.
well, you've got to think. It's like what happened at that shooting in Colorado where that congresswoman was shot. A fella came out of the grocery store that had his concealed pistol with him.
Yeah.
He heard the shots. He came out of the store, and the thing was going on right there in front of the store. And he saw an individual standing there with a pistol in his hand. Now, had that been somebody else, they might have shot that guy out of hand without thinking. This guy, though, was thinking. He'd been around firearms his whole life. He knew that a guy standing there with a pistol with the slide all the way back, that it either jammed up or was empty. So it was not a threat until you got close up and he threw it at you or tried to beat you over the head with it. So he did not shoot that guy. But many other people, including law enforcement, would have shot him. Not all law enforcement guys, but the rookies, the people that are real nervous, they hadn't been around long enough, see this guy standing there with a gun, there's just been shooting out in the parking lot. This guy was very fortunate that he didn't get shot. And I told you in that situation what to do. If you're the guy that picked up the gun, see what happened, some bystanders knocked the gun out of the shooter's hand. And it went skittering across the pavement, and this guy thought, well, I'm going to make sure nobody gets it. So he picked it up. Well, the problem there was then he could get shot for holding it, accidentally like.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you do in a case like that is stand on it. Don't let anybody else pick it up. Stand on it and hold your hands up. That way the police arrive, you're not going to be at risk there, maybe. Because there's been some unfortunate situations lately with the police around the country. So, but you've got to do something. You can't just leave it there and run like you see in the movies, because they want to have an hour-long TV show or a 2-hour-long movie. So the victim has the opportunity to pick up the bad guy's gun and shoot him with it, and they don't do it. They run the other way, and the bad guy picks it up, and then you've got a movie with the bad guy chasing him again. So don't do that. It's not a movie. Life is not a movie, folks. Life, unfortunately for some of you out there, life is not what you see on Facebook. Life is not what you see on YouTube. Life is not what you see in the movies
or
or
TV.
television. So life is reality. That's the real story, the real world. And so you see something like this, hands up, stand on it.
It can't be. It's the same way. One of the things that they covered last night was carrying your weapon into the church. Even though you have concealed carry, you can't do that unless you go to an 8-hour class and you get permission of the priest or pastor or whoever's the head of the church.
Yeah.
But you can't go in there. Now, I won't say that my weapon isn't far when I'm at church.
Yeah.
But
So-
the thing is you cannot go in the church. My question I wanted to ask, and I didn't get a chance, is what if something came down in the church and you had your weapon in the car?
Well, in that case, then if you can get to it, then no holds are barred at that point.
Yeah.
If there's a shooting situation, if it's an emergency situation, that's a different set of circumstances. And then again, it's better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
Exactly.
So there again, it's thinking. It's always thinking.
It's using your head.
Yeah.
Common sense.
All right. We got a little bit of time. Don't have any time left for this hour. But on the education front, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. Vladimir Lenin.
Yep.
Common Core.
Common Core.
Common Core.
Exactly. Common Core. Lenin would love Common Core.
He probably invented it and just sent it from hell.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, you can say that.
I can say
Yeah,
that.
that's a place. Hell is a place. Okay. Which a lot of people are going to. A lot of people already
I
have.
gotta stretch.
I guarantee you there's more people in hell than there are in heaven. Where some people think that nobody's in heaven yet. No, Jesus told us. Jesus told that guy on the cross next to him that he